This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. This is J Bransom, who was born on June 3rd, 1921. He served in the U.S. Army, and he served in the North African and European theater of World War II. He is with us at the Burleson Public Library in Burleson, Texas. Mr. Bransom, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Let's start with some just very simple questions. Where were you before the war? Where were you born and raised?
Well, practically lived right across the street here. I was living in Burleson by the old high school.
Okay. And what did your parents do? What was your family like?
My dad was a cattle trader, and my mother, of course, was just a housewife.
Did you have any siblings, or?
I had two sisters. One was 5 years younger than me, one's 6 years older than me, and both of them are still living.
Okay. Well, what kind of schooling did you have? What kind of education or occupation did you have before the war?
Well, I went to school about 12 years, never did graduate.
How did you end up getting into the Army?
Well, I would have never got in the Army had I not been drafted.
And were you drafted following Pearl Harbor, or?
I was drafted August 8, 1942.
Okay. Did you have any choice of which branch you went into, or did they?
Army.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And what kind of training did you go through?
Well, I went to Fort Walters for training, and about the second day, I don't know whether I broke my left ankle or what, but I never did take any more training. I stayed in my room all the time till I was shipped out down to Louisiana on maneuvers. The company I went into from Fort Walters was already established. It was a mobile shower unit, and we followed the heavy artillery. But I stayed there on maneuvers until the next summer. No, until winter, and then I went to Fort Shelby, Mississippi.
Okay.
Stayed there till I went into the Army. Into overseas.
Now you said mobile showers. What is that?
At that particular time, we had a huge truck that opened up on each side and had showers on it. They were established for it, set up close to the front, where all of the men could come back and take a shower and change their clothes. And it had a sterilization unit with it in this truck, but it was steam sterilization. And we found out that when the ODs and things were sterilized, it'd shrink them up. So they converted that, got rid of that, and got a one they could set up out in the field with the heads and so forth on it. We always had to set up by creek and to draw water out of it.
So your role before you went overseas was to be a part of these mobile showers, or to?
Well, we also had clothing there. They would issue the clothing to the soldiers as they came back from the front or from the artillery, whatever they were in. But we stayed close to the front as possible.
These maneuvers, how many men were involved, or?
That we had in our company, probably I can't remember, but I'd say probably 200.
As part of a larger overall group, or?
No, that was the total group.
Okay.
I can't say for sure, but my job was issuing clothing and just doing whatever was necessary.
How did you find out you were going overseas?
Well, you find out pretty quick whenever they, make a determination that you're going. We left Camp Shelby, was in the summertime, went to New York, fully dressed in ODs. I don't know where then we went to North Africa.
Mm-hmm. Well, what happened when you first reached North Africa?
Well, we got off the boat and during an air raid, and all tried to find cover. It was at Oran, North Africa.
So was it a beach landing for combat,
No,
or
it was
just
we wasn't, the front, they had already taken the location. It wasn't anything, the only thing was just during an air raid.
Well, what happened in North Africa? How long did you stay?
Well, all we did there at Oran, we didn't stay too long, and I can't even remember whether we even set up our unit or not. We didn't do much in North Africa. We moved from there to Algiers, but by the time we got there, they had already went into Sicily. So we just kind of followed, and we went to Algiers, and then moved from Algiers to Tunis. And of course, we got in there at night during an air raid, and they moved us out into the mountains there, and we were supposed to go into Sicily, but they took Sicily before we went. But at that particular place was where I told you that I went into Tunis to. So I have to go ahead and say that.
Sure.
I went into Tunis to see one of my cousins, Monroe Wicker. He was in the Signal Corps, and I was walking down the street. Command car pulled up, and George Jr. Bransom got out of it. He was a pilot, I think a B-17 pilot. So I visited with him a few minutes, then went on in and saw Monroe, and got back out on the mountain by dark.
All Burleson boys just happened to meet and...
Yeah, it was just fortunate. Well, being over there, you know, the 36th Division was there, and I did, during the time I was in the shower unit, I did see several of them that I knew, people that I knew, guys that I knew. I don't remember their names now or anything, but we normally set up with the heavy artillery.
Well, what did you see combat at all, or
No combat.
did you see the results of combat and injured men?
We were always behind the front with no, because we couldn't be in the combat area and do what we were supposed to do. We had to follow them, and like I said, we set up normally with the heavy artillery, which was, I don't know how far back according to what battle it was in, but the first one we went to was Casina, and they said we were 6 miles from the front there.
That's still pretty close.
We lost several thousand men there. We were close to a road, I believe it was Highway 6, if I'm not mistaken, and they brought the soldiers back dead in one of those 6x6 trucks piled up like cordwood.
Well, what was that kind of experience like to go from Burleson over there and see that?
Well, you wasn't very happy about it.
No.
I didn't like it from the day I went in till the day I got out. But you have to cope with it, so there's nothing you can do about it.
What was the view that you had of your role in the Army?
Well, I was what you might say a supply man.
But how did you feel about your service while you were in there?
Well, I didn't like it, but I coped with it. I never did get into any trouble or anything.
Well, speaking of that, did you ever get to take leave or?
No, not until we got into way northern Italy, and the war was practically over, and I went over to Venice on leave then, and it was a little island close to, we went through Venice over to another island, and then we could come back on the boat over to there. I think I was over there 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, tell me, where were you when the war ended? Were you still over there?
I was in North Italy as far as you could go.
What was the attitude of the men, or your attitude when?
Well, most everybody had a good attitude. I didn't see anybody, that caused any trouble or anything. Of course, some of the guys would get lit on vino, but everybody seemed to be, pretty stable.
Did you have many interactions with the natives of the countries that you were in, or?
Well, naturally we saw some, but not much, because it was during the war and they kind of, some had come around trying to sell things or something, but not a whole lot, no.
Did you?
They were very good people, the ones that I ever dealt with there in Italy. I didn't do much with North Africa, because speaking their language is almost impossible.
I was about to ask, was there any kind of language barrier in Italy even?
Oh yeah, they of course Italian, and I learned a little bit Italian, but not much. I was in Italy 19 months, so you accidentally learned a little something.
Well, how did you end up coming back home?
Well, when I was fortunate, I had two sons, and I was one of the first ones, just myself and another sergeant that he wasn't a sergeant, had been a sergeant, but he was busted and put in our outfit because he was going overseas, and he had a lot of service time. So his service time and me having two children, we were the first two to leave. And I think they stayed about 3 or 4 months after that, my company.
You remember what ship that you came back on?
No, it was 20% overloaded when we got there. And they were supposed to rotate it where you could sleep part-time down on the bunk, but they never did rotate anything. So we stayed on deck I guess it was whatever time it took to get back, about 10 days probably.
Were you able to bring anything home with you from Europe at all, or?
No, not really. I did pick up a couple of 3 items in Rome. We were set up by a big museum that was, what we were told, had 2 boats in there that was over 2,000 years old, and when the Germans left, they burned it. And there was a lot of pegs and things, and I picked up about 3 or 4 of those just to bring back.
Now, you've mentioned Rome and you've mentioned Venice. What was it like to be in those cities during the war? Or even just
after? Time we got there, well, of course, they'd already taken Rome, and they didn't bomb it or anything. So we didn't stay there very long. We just stayed there, moved on up closer to the front where we could provide the service we was set up to do.
Well, when you came home, where did your ship dock at?
We docked back in, I guess, in New Jersey, and they sent me from there to San Antonio, and from San Antonio to Camp Shelby. And they was going to keep me in because I was in supply, but they eventually let me out. Okay. And I got out down there.
Well, tell me, when you came back to Burleson, what was the first thing that you did?
Well, I did get a disability from injuries that I got with my breaking my ankle in the first training, and then I jumped into a creek bed during an air raid and injured my right foot and my hip and my knee. And by having a disability, well, I was able to get a job with the government, and I stayed with the government till I retired. My military time in government was 36 years. The last 16 years that I worked for the government, I was a contracting officer for the storage of military personnel's household goods. We did the contracts with them. I had Texas, Louisiana, New Mexico, and I stayed in that for 16 years.
Now you mentioned having 2 children, and I've met your wife before, and she's a wonderful person.
Thank you.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about how you met her, or how it was like to? You said you had children before the war. Or?
Yeah, she and I went together a couple of years before I went in the service, and then when I went in, well, we decided to get married. I got married August 30th of 1942. She had 2 sons. And the one was 3, 4, the other one was 2 when we married. And of course, it's hard to leave, you know, whenever you,
Yeah.
but you just have to do what you have to.
Now you said you worked for the government. Where did you work for them at, or what did you
Well, when
start
I
out
first
doing?
went to work for the government, it was at the old Fort Worth Army Depot. And I worked in salvage, selling salvage property for a couple of years. And then I moved on over into storage. And then from storage, I went into procurement and was a purchasing agent 5 years. Then I went into production control for transportation items. And then I went in as a management analyst. And I got quite a bit of, I got about several hundred hours training while I was in this working, you know. I got 16 college credits in accounting. We'd go to school every Monday, 4 hours. And so I was able to, I got my GD and everything, so I was able to get quite a bit of training. And I was a management analyst for a year. And then I wrote procedures and training in storage for about a year. And then I was a supply officer at Eagle Mountain Army Airfield for about a year till I found out how much I was responsible for and got out of that. And then fortunately, after that, the depot was fixing to close, and I got into the household goods as an assistant to the gentleman that had that. We had about 6 people. So I was his assistant, and I worked with him for, I guess 3 or 4 years, and then we moved our office from the depot to Dallas, and he got another job over there, so I got his job, and they let me come back to Fort Worth. So I had an office back out at the old Army depot from then on for 16 years there, and I traveled, maybe sometime 2 weeks out of a month, sometime 1, whatever I wanted to do, whatever. I had 2 other men that traveled also. We had Texas, Louisiana, and New Mexico.
Well, did you ever stay in contact with anybody that you served with overseas?
One man that lived in Abilene, I did. He was a real good friend of mine. In fact, when I got injured in Italy, he took care of me, brought me my food and everything to my tent. I didn't go to the hospital. I just stayed in the tent. In fact, I didn't even know where it was. And but I don't know, probably recuperate. It took me probably at least a month.
Boy. Well, did you ever join any veterans organizations or?
I belong to the Disabled Veterans. I